Hi, welcome back to this video series on Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Today I will talk about static Diffie-Hellman key exchange and compare against the ephemeral key exchange very briefly. So the picture that we are seeing has been used for all the series that we have done so far. What you're seeing is basically Alice and Bob agreeing on two public parameters, G and P. G is a group generator, P is the cyclic group, for example, Z star P. Okay. Alice picks a private random number X. She doesn't disclose that to anyone. It's private. Similarly, Bob does on his side picks a random number Y, which is also private. And then Alice computes G power X mod P. Simultaneously, Bob could also compute his public key G power Y mod P. They both exchange their public keys. Capital A is the public key from Alice to Bob. Capital B is from Bob to Alice. And then they basically arrive at the same secret key by taking the partner's public key and raise it to their own private key. So due to the rules of exponents, both values are same. That's the reason why we have key to be k here. So very quickly, what it means is that let's look at the Alice side, right? What is capital B? Capital B is nothing but G power Y, right? And she's raising it to power X, right? This is nothing but G power XY. And the same thing happens on Bob's side, right? Bob also takes Alice's public key, which is G power X, right? And she, on Bob's side, right? And rise to his public key. So they both have the same key. That's the reason why K is the same. Okay, so this is basically the idea. And now the question is, what is the meaning of static Diffie-Hellman? Static Diffie-Hellman means that these numbers that you're seeing are fixed. For example, Alice decided to always use the same X, or Bob decided to use the same Y. It is okay if one of them is different. The reason is that every time one chooses their own private key, the resulting key K will be different, right? Because as we have talked earlier, we are mixing the peer's public key. If the peer's public key changes, the resulting key will be different. But still, this is called static Diffie-Hellman key exchange because one of the peers is basically fixing the random number, the private key. So what is the consequence to security? So let's assume through some attacks, the attacker was able to predict the value of X, okay? The X is private, remember X is private, that it was never sent out. Okay, now if the attacker predicted X, that means it's easy to now compute the final key K, because all we have to do is he knows the public key sent by Bob to Alice, that's the capital B, right? This is G power Y. So the attacker just takes G power Y from Bob. Since he already derived X, so he can now compute G power X. So now he also has the same key K. So the attacker learned the same key, which is the same. You see here, it's the same key. Okay, this is bad. So if one of the parties is fixing the private key, and if that private key is leaked, now all future communications will be decrypted because of this reason that I just said. Even though Bob is keep on changing his Y, it doesn't matter. Once one of the X's, one private variable is leaked, it doesn't matter whether other private variable is changed or not. So that's the reason static Diffie-Hellman is usually not good. And from a certificate point of view, from a digital certificate point of view, the certificate would contain, in the case of static Diffie-Hellman, like if you see ciphers like TLS _DH, What it means is that they probably the sender or the receiver, client or server, is basically fixing the private key. Okay, and they're not changing between runs. So from one session to another session, the same private key is used. That's basically the reason why the static DH is not recommended. Okay. From a digital certificate perspective, some certificates that are very rarely used, but there are some certificates where let's say let's make Bob as a server. Okay, Bob's digital certificate will have, let me draw a digital certificate of Bob. It will have G power Y, that's basically capital B, right? And it is signed by the certificate authority. Somebody signs this capital B. So Alice can now check whether she can trust Bob's public key because it's signed by some certificate authority signs this public key. Okay, using RSA usually, or elliptic curve, which I have not talked about. Elliptic curve is something I will talk later on. But you see the idea that on the certificate, Bob will put his Y, no, sorry, not his Y, of course, his G power Y, and send it to Alice. Now Alice knows capital B because it's part of the certificate, and she will just take capital B and raise it to her X. Okay, just to recall, the X and Y never exchanged. Okay, this is completely hidden. Hopefully it's hidden, nobody sees that. Okay, the certificate will have, if Bob wants to use a DH certificate, he will just put capital B as part of the certificate and get it signed by a CA. If the CA supports DH certificate, then it will be signed. Okay. The problem, as I said earlier, is that if Bob fixes his Y and never changes it, let's assume somehow his Y got leaked, then all of the recorded communication between Alice and Bob can be broken, because all the attacker has to do is take the capital A, right? Capital A can be changing between every session. That's not a problem. Attacker can get any capital A he wants. Since he knows the Y, which is fixed, he rises to Y. Okay, what is A power Y, which is exactly the secret key K. Okay, that's the reason why static certificates are not good. So static DH should be avoided. What about the ephemeral key? So let me explain what that is. So you might have seen some ciphers which have something like this: DLS_THE, which means that every time the public keys are exchanged, there is a new private key. Okay, so neither Alice nor Bob, none of them is using the same private key. Okay, that's good, because then they will have new key K every time. So if for some reason attacker was able to find their private key, they can only break that particular session. They cannot break the past sessions, right? Because the X and Y's are changing for each session or each handshake, informally speaking. So that's the idea of ephemeral. Ephemeral is to never reuse your private key. You're basically changing the private key. Therefore, the public keys are unique because of randomness of X and Y. But now the question is, what is there on the certificate? Certificate doesn't have anything about capital B nor capital A. The thing though is that the certificate has, say, for example, let's say Bob bought a certificate. Okay, Bob will sign his capital B, right, using his certificate. Bob signs it using RSA, for example. RSA is used to sign Bob's public key. Okay, that means now Alice can check actually that that Bob actually has the first of all, Alice can check whether it is really the Bob's public key. Okay, that's basically the idea of digital certificate. And then she can trust the capital B, that is that she is actually talking to Bob. Okay, so long story short, if you use DHE, if the random number generation process is properly done, for very large group size P, the K value will be different every time the handshake is done. Every time the DH algorithm is executed, key K is unique. Okay, so somebody stealing the capital X, stealing the small x, small y, cannot recover past recorded communication because it's changing from one handshake to another handshake. Okay, and somebody breaking the RSA digital signature will not be able to decrypt the recorded sessions because the recorded sessions are all based on different private keys that are generated for each handshake. That's the reason it's called forward secrecy. Okay, that's basically it. Thank you very much.